With you is for until we're done, and then once we're done,
Oh, that's great. Well, you have got to get, yeah, what a story. Knockout of the year, knockout maybe of our next decade. We shall see. Okay, so I'm just going to tweet
with
this.
you is for until we're done, and then once we're done.
Oh, that's great. Oh, whoops, well, you have got to get, yeah, what a story. There we go. Okay, I am going to just send this out. And then we'll get
so Kevin, I think the last time we were on, we talked a little bit about the old ring at Caesar's Palace, a little bit about Holyfield Boat 2, the first fight I ever went to. And I was in Las Vegas about 3 weeks ago, and I was sitting back at the back pool, the Apollo pool, kind of near the adult pool. And I was thinking, man, I think I'm probably sitting right where the ring used to be. Yeah, you know, it's just amazing to think. You know, I every time I go there, I'm just like, man, this place is completely different. It's amazing. But
a lot less,
you know, just
back in those days.
Oh man, it's amazing. I mean, I remember walking past just the regular pool to get back to, you know, the temporary setup of the ring, and I'm sitting there, and I'm with my daughter and my fiance, and I'm like, you know, I'm pretty sure this is where the ring was when we used to come here when I was a lot younger. So, pretty neat memory to kind of have.
It sure was, yeah.
Oh my gosh! All right, well, we'll get started. Thank you for joining us at Writing and Fighting. A lot of my students are actually not on campus because we are all remote, as it is 2020, and many actually are international. So they are tuning in, maybe it's 4 a.m. At a lot of places. So thank you everyone for doing that. But I'm joined here, I'll quickly, Atticus, who's a great friend, alum of the class, Scott Evans, who is an entrepreneur, businessman in Florida. Also, maybe more importantly, my high school classmate back in Ohio. And he is my boxing guy. Like sometimes, you know, I get into MMA, midterms, I always know to turn to Scott. So I love it. And I'm wearing my boxing
yes.
Dead because
very cool. Very cool.
It's apropos because this is the big fight we've been waiting for. And that brings me to our very special guest, Kevin Iole. Thank you. You're returning to the classroom where we take combat sports and look at writing to understand the maneuvers, how to make it better, understand how to make it active. And so glad for you to join us. I have so many questions. And we're going to jump right into boxing because you know, this year has been crazy. We talked about in April when all the short sports was shut down. And then MMA, pretty much the first one to come back and very successful. Boxing also came back this year. And I was looking up the ratings, not too strong. And it was interesting to look at what people were saying about it. Top Rank, down 51%. From it had average viewers of 332,000 this June, where it was 680,000. Premiere down 36%. Zone, which they don't provide their viewers, but it's pretty much they've had to, I think, furlough or lay off 12%. And Canelo Alvarez is actually suing for breach of contract. So pretty much we know things probably aren't doing too well there. But, you know, it's been said, like as Showtime, Stephen Espinoza said, that 48 hours, you know, is doing better than NBA.
Right.
So like.
But it always does. So that's, you know.
Oh, well, there you go. There you go. But this could also just be that we are, all of sports, maybe we are fatigued or we're just not in the right state of mind. I want to talk to you because me, I would love your perspective on all this. I just don't think we've had a really big fight until now. And we have a big one. Go ahead, please.
Well, I did a story in August on the TV ratings, and I did a lot. It was mostly on the UFC TV ratings, which were high, and their streaming numbers were high, and their pay-per-view numbers were high relative to everything else. Where most of the other sports went down. But boxing actually didn't do as badly as you think, especially Top Rank. So I'll just clarify a couple of things. When Top Rank was doing the Tuesday and Thursday series in the summer, they actually were the highest rated show in the slot. And they were the highest rated show for ESPN that night. So there's a thing called the HUT level, households using television. And in the summers, the hot level always goes down. People are out, they're doing things. Now, of course, this summer, a little different. So it's, a little bit difficult to always tell. But, people are not necessarily sitting in front of the TV in June and July in the evening. They're out taking a walk, they're out, at the pool, whatever they're doing. So while Top Rank's numbers weren't anywhere near the sheer numbers that UFC did, UFC was mainly going on Saturday nights, which is a good, strong night for fights. And boxing was going on Tuesday and Thursday, which is, when anything is ever new, people don't do well with it. And then on top of that, it was just, we're in the middle of the pandemic, so people were having trouble finding it. So I think the numbers, Nancy, were not as bad as maybe some people thought. Plus, because they had so many fallouts, there were some good fights that were made, and, guys were getting COVID, and, there was a lot of stuff that was happening that they didn't have the fights that they wanted to have. So I kind of felt like that was good. Now, on the PBC side of things, and their last show on Fox, I think it was September 1st, things changed in the way Nielsen does the ratings. In the past, they never included bars and restaurants that would have the fights on, but now they do. So their show that they did in early September, I saw the PBC and other people congratulating online. I said, actually, they didn't do as good as they thought, because now that's including bars and restaurants. It's not apples to apples at the same point, so it was different. But the TV ratings game is a crazy thing. And the one thing that we know that brings people out is when you have big name fighters in fights that you guys want to see, that will get people watching and talking.
No, exactly. And let's talk about this big fight, because you're going to be covering the press conference tonight.
Yep.
Which I'm very interested in. This fight has been coming for years when Teofimo, am I saying this right? Teofimo's father went up to Lomachenko at a fight and said, my son, this is after he only had 5 fights.
Yeah.
And said, my son's going to knock you out. So we've had some trash talking. But when you look at it, that we talk about storylines.
Right.
Atticus, and this is part of our thing. This one has so many. It's right. Really ripe to have the seasoned amateur of 300 amateur fights.
400.
400.
396 and 1.
396 and 1. And then they both have 13 professional fights. But he's known for his precision. Scott, I know you know Lomo and know all about, how much technique, he's older, he's had that experience, versus this young guy who's unorthodox, has knocked out 12 of 13, and just has that kind of brash kind of attitude. It's like, for me, this is exciting. And I want to know, Kevin, I sometimes wonder, have they kind of made this happen, or is this really coming together, this fight?
It's really coming together. I mean, it's one of those things where it was a naturally emerging fight. So as you mentioned correctly, Teofimo's father, Teofimo Lopez Sr., he's a guy that doesn't hold his emotions back. He says what he thinks, and whatever comes into his head comes out his mouth immediately. And there's no filter there. And so I was at that fight. It was he was fighting Jose Pedraza in New York at Madison Square Garden. And it was 2 days before the fight. And a lot of times in the hotel where a lot of the fighters stay, the Stewart Hotel is directly across the street from Madison Square Garden. The fighters will sit in the lobby and, spend time there, and there'll be fans in the lobby too. And so, Lomo was in the lobby there, and he was signing autographs for people. And Teofimo Jr. and Teofimo Sr. came in. Teofimo Jr. acknowledged Loma and got on the elevator and went upstairs. Teofimo Sr. turned around and came back, and he got in Loma's face and he gave him the throat slash sign. And he, my son's going to kill you. And this is when he had 5 fights. Now, I want to backtrack a little bit to the 2016 Olympics. I'm covering the Olympics. I'm sitting in Rio, and they had two sessions, one in the morning, and then you had a couple of hours, and then they had an evening session. So I'm writing my story from the morning session, and I see this fighter coming up, and he's in the country's gear, and I didn't recognize the colors, but it turned out it was Honduras. And I see this fighter walking up, and he comes up to me, and he looks at me and says, "Are you Kevin Iole?" And I said, "Yes." He goes, "I'm Teofimo Lopez, and you're going to be writing about me soon." And I just thought it was like an incredible thing. And I just loved him as that attitude that he had. And so I sat there and I talked to him for maybe about 20 minutes, half an hour. And I found out that he was an American, and he didn't make the US team. So he was fighting for Honduras, where his family was from. And, so I had all this. So I paid particular attention to him as a pro. So I had him as my prospect of the year, this great honor that I give out twice, and his first year, I think he was 6-0. And everybody else was given to Ryan Garcia, and I gave to Lopez. And then the second year, Lopez won it by everybody, including me. But I paid a lot of attention to him because of, his attitude. And I saw his fight down there. And I just kind of felt like this is a guy that might be able to do something. He's a better suited to the professional ranks than the amateur ranks.
Got it. Scott, I could ask another question, but I won't because of time. Did you want to take the next question?
The last time I saw a young, brash Brooklynite go up against a really solid Soviet, they created a dance based on what his legs did when he got hit. And I've looked at this a million different ways, and I'm seeing a lot of the same things. I know you've got a lot bigger background with Teofimo than I do. What are your thoughts, just on this matchup going in? There's a lot of parallels to that fight, and I just want to see what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I have covered boxing since I was 19 years old. When I was in college, I got a full-time job at a newspaper. So I used to go to school in the day, and then in the evening I would go and mostly take scores of high school volleyball games and high school football games and all that. But nobody liked boxing, and I did. So when there was fights, even though they were club fights, I went and covered them. So I've been covering, I just had my 61st birthday, I hate to mention, recently. So I've been covering boxing for 42 years, and I've been going to fights. And what I learned in those 42 years is if everything else is equal, always take the better boxer. And if you bet that all the time, you usually come out on top. So that would take me into this fight and say, bet on Vasily Lomachenko. He's the better boxer. He's got the great movement. I just talked to Andre Ward this morning, and Andre was explaining his footwork to me and why Vasily's footwork is so good. And this is a guy that went to dance classes. When he started in Ukraine, his father said, "Okay, I'm going to make you a special fighter." And he didn't care about how he threw punches. He didn't care if he knew how to slip punches or get away from punches at first. He just wanted him to work on his feet. And so he had good footwork, and he was light on his feet, and he was comfortable in tight spaces moving around. And they did that for years before he really started working on the other things. And now that's what separates him. In my story that should be posted sometime today, Bob Arum, who's promoted boxing for over 50 years, I think 55 years, said Lomachenko's footwork is the best he has seen since Muhammad Ali. And not the late Muhammad Ali in the 70s, but the Ali before he was stripped of the title in 1967. That Ali, who I believe was probably the greatest fighter in that 3-year period, nobody was ever better. He was so hard to hit. He moved so well. And Bob said, nobody's been better with footwork since Muhammad Ali than Vasily Lomachenko.
Wow. Okay. I want to ask you about size, because a student actually brought this up to me. We know that Lopez has the size advantage, with Lomo coming up. One of my students said that Lopez may have had too good of COVID quarantine in terms of packing on a few. Is this an accurate report, or?
Yeah, no, he's big. I mean, I did an interview with him probably on Zoom 2 weeks ago, and I commented on the interview. I said, "My Lord, you're massive." I mean, you see his shoulders and arms are really big. He's got to make 135 pounds on Friday, and then after that, he can weigh what he wants to weigh. but he's big, and I've written this, and I think this is the theme for this fight. Normally, size isn't all that big of an issue, but I think in this fight, you know, if you saw my interview with Vasily, I asked him the specific question. I said, if there was a big fight for you at featherweight, could you make featherweight? That's 2 divisions down. He said yes, no question about it. So Vasily is a small lightweight, kind of fighting up, and Teofimo is a big lightweight fighting down. So it would be very easy to see Vasily at 126 and Teofimo at 140 right now, both in fight, and it would be no surprise, and yet here they are fighting each other. So I think size is a factor in this fight, but Loma is such a smart fighter, and he knows how to use somebody else's size against them, and how to create angles that, you know, they get hit by punches they don't see, that I don't think it's going to be as big of an issue as it could be in other fights.
Yeah. I also wonder how the weight cut will go. You know, that's always, you know, a factor I think of, especially in MMA. And I had thought maybe with being in the Apex, or they're not in Apex, they're in MGM. But they still have to quarantine, and they have to be separate. And she told me this is actually harder for fighters, because it used to be you could go to the sauna, you could run, you could do all these, and that makes it more of a challenge.
They have a nice setup down there, Nancy. They have so there's the fighters have access to everything they need. So they each have their own saunas, so they can do the sauna. There's a place where they can run. You know, so they can do what they need to do. So that isn't an issue. They have separate rings, so there's practice rings. If you imagine, they're in the MGM Grand Conference Centers where the fights are, and they have one that's maybe 4 or 5 conference rooms all together. That's where they're having the fights. But on the wall on the other side, they have where the weigh-ins are. They have 2 extra rings where the camps can spar and do what they want to do. And there's about 6 or 7 other rooms down there. Even when they check their weight, they have separate rooms, and there's restrictions on who can go in and when you can go in and what you can touch and what can't be touched, and all those type of things. They really have done a fantastic job. I actually took some photos that I posted on social media in June of kind of the behind the scenes of what Top Rank did. And, you know, you see everything is, you know, sealed and all that. So I don't know that it's going to be a problem for them making weight. They're going to be able to make weight. I think the problem for Teofimo, if he has trouble, and I don't want to say that he will, because I don't think he will, it'll be on him, not on the building or where he's at.
So interesting. Okay. And then, you know, please, anybody chime in with these questions about Lomachenko versus Lopez, because this is a title unification bout, but Lomachenko is the franchise champion, and but why is he just the franchise champion? Why is Lomachenko not the
Well, so let's talk about. I was on a Zoom call with Mauricio Suleiman on Monday. He is the president of the WBC, and he was talking to reporters to try to answer questions because he knew that would come up. And that was the first thing that came up: the franchise champion. So you may have seen Lomachenko won the WBC lightweight title in the ring, and he's never lost it. Now he's added the WBA and the WBO championship, so he's got all 3 of those belts. But now all of a sudden, Devin Haney is running around, and Devin Haney has a WBC belt. And this is what happens in boxing, and I think is one of the reasons that boxing has fallen below the UFC and MMA in popularity, because it's hard for people to keep track of what's going on. So even I was on, Dan Rayfield was on there. I'm trying to think of all the reporters. There was Jake Donovan from Boxing Scene was on, Doug Fisher from Ring. There was a bunch of us that were on there. Dylan Hernandez from the LA Times, Lance Pugmire from The Athletic, a bunch of top boxing writers were on this call, and we were confused by what was going on. So, you know, the fact that we follow this every day.
Yes.
Mauricio said, even right now, and I put this in my boxing notebook that was published yesterday, quote, Vasily Lomachenko is the WBC champion.
Okay.
Period. Now, he applied for the designation as the franchise champion, which they created for Canelo Alvarez. And the theoretical benefit of that is you don't have to fight mandatory challengers in that division if you do that. So that's what they're kind of giving you a break on. They're saying, if you take this fight, if you get this designation, you're a special fighter, you're above most of the rest. And we're only going to do this a couple of times. And you're a guy that we believe is good enough to do that. And so now he can move different weight classes if he wants without being stripped, and he'll keep that designation. So that is really what it is. So it's something above and beyond. I think really what it is a way to prevent fighters from dumping the championship, right? Because what ends up happening a lot of times is this organization says, okay, Kevin, you have to fight so-and-so, and I don't want to fight so-and-so because there's a more lucrative fight over here against somebody else. And so I give your championship up because I still have another belt and I fight this guy. Well, the WBC thinks it's better to have prominent fighters like Canelo and like Vasily Lomachenko, and I'm sure Tyson Fury at some point will fall into that category, that they want them to be WBC champions, so they're affiliated with them. Because why? There's bigger money fights. They make more money. The way the sanctioning body makes money is they get a percentage of their purses for a sanctioning fee.
Yeah.
And so that's the way that all works. So basically at the end of the line, they're just trying to find ways to keep the biggest name guys happy and not dumping their championship. To me, that's what the franchise belt really ultimately is behind the scenes.
I can see the point from, and I understand that you don't want someone to not fight and then not have someone move in. But this kind of, we talk about this, that this is the confusing part of boxing, that people like, you know, one of the first things I ask my students in the beginning of the semester, who's the heavyweight champion of the world? You know, and like, they can't answer that question, where, you know, back when I was a kid, was Mike Tyson, you know, I readily knew that answer. Now there are other reasons why that might be, but that's an issue. But just looking into, because I want boxing. I mean, when, you know, I'm wearing my boxing is declared dead in 1903 shirt, because it's always going to be around. It is a dinosaur that will live. I guess a tortoise. My daughter always says, don't say the dinosaur, say the tortoise, because it's still around. Do they need other things? Do they need more of a sanctioning body to kind of declare, because it's more now like pie in the sky, like we will do this fight? Do you think that would help?
Well, I think let's compare it to MMA. So MMA has different, you know, promoters, but the promoters have their own championships, and in boxing they don't have that. So in MMA, I think most people think the UFC champion is the quote unquote champion of all MMA, right? Not just of the UFC. Bellator have won. And in most cases, that's true. But sometimes Bellator or somebody else will have a specific fighter who's better than the UFC champion at a given time. You know, usually that doesn't happen, but every now and then that could be the case. But most people, because the UFC adheres to this philosophy, we are going to make the best guys fight the best guys. And we're going to have challengers fight each other so that they're taking tough fights, so that when they go for the championship, we know they're good and the public knows who they are and the public knows they've had these good fights. There's nothing wrong with boxing that a little organization couldn't fix. But I asked a question on the Zoom with Mauricio Suleiman on Monday. I said, why don't you work with your peers at the WBO, the WBA, and the IBF and share rankings? Because the rankings would be a big thing. Because what you have now is sometimes in the WBA, a guy is ranked number one and he's not even ranked in the other organizations. And it creates all sorts of problems. And if they at least shared rankings, and so, I mean, the sanctioning bodies are for-profit organizations that then take away from the organization of sport. The fighters themselves, you know, they think about it later. They get stripped of a champ because, and think of Muhammad Ali, like going back, let's go back to when he fought Leon Spinks. He loses the title. At the time, there was only two major sanctioning bodies, the WBA and the WBC. Ali was champion of both. He ends up losing the first fight to Spinks. Spinks says, hey, Muhammad Ali is the greatest of all time. I want to give him a rematch. And so he does. The WBC said, no, you have to fight Larry Holmes. You cannot do this. You have to fight Larry Holmes, who's our number one contender. Now, it turns out Larry Holmes went on to be a great champion and a Hall of Famer himself. But at that time, the public wanted to see the gold medalist Leon Spinks fight Muhammad Ali in a rematch. So they went to the Silver Dome. Spinks was stripped of the WBC championship. It was still for the WBA title. They fought on ABC. 93 million people watched the fight. So do you think the WBC got screwed out of that because their championship was not on the line? And then Ken Norton fought fought Holmes for the WBC belt. And what was one of the great fights in boxing history, but it was a Saturday afternoon on CBS Sports Spectacular, and it had an attendance of, can you guess how much? 4,000.
Wow.
So that shows you right then and there,
Yes.
there's no reason to do what they did. So I think that, if boxing could get the organization under control, it would grow in popularity just like MMA has. People love to watch people fight, but they want to have some organization. They want to have some connection to it.
Well, and then this could be another solution that we could possibly be having is that you mentioned network TV. This is not a pay-per-view.
Right.
I believe in any other year, this is that kind of fight, and that means more money to the promotion and to the fighters. But I am very happy to see that it's on a basic cable network because I want eyeballs there. We got to grow the interest, I think. What is your view on this being not a pay-per-view?
I love that it's not pay-per-view because I am an advocate for the fans. I'm an advocate for the people out there who are watching, who aren't in the boxing business. And you shouldn't have to pay, you don't have to pay $75 to watch the Super Bowl. You don't have to pay that money to watch the NBA finals. You just turn the TV on, you sit in your chair and you drink a beer and, or in my case, a Diet Pepsi, and you watch the fight. You don't worry about, or watch the game. You don't have to worry about paying for it. Yeah. But that's what happens in boxing. And Floyd Mayweather, who, I have the utmost respect for, he changed the attitude of so many fighters because he made pay-per-view look like a destination. And pay-per-view is only a destination for so few fighters. Most pay-per-view fights flub. The Showtime one a couple of weeks ago with the Charlo brothers didn't even do 100,000 on pay-per-view. It was not very good, even though the card was a good card and everything. But you hear those numbers that Mayweather got and Manny Pacquiao, and you mentioned Mike Tyson and fighters like that did well on pay-per-view. But you're hurting the sport by taking the biggest events, the best stars, the ones that people want to see, and you're putting it behind closed doors where people can't watch it. And you've created a whole generation of thieves because now you have people who steal the signal, and it happens all the time. And so, I think going away from television has been a huge, network television has been a huge problem for them. That goes back into the 70s when HBO first came around.
Yeah. No, and I also think during the pandemic, people used to be like, I'll buy the pay-per-view, come over to my house. Right. And we'll share, bring some chips and you're good. But now, that's what, $60, $70. I mean, they can get expensive boxing. And I think that right now, I'm so glad they're making that choice. No,
I think it was brilliant. ESPN looked at it and they said, hey, we're not sure there's going to be any college football. Now there's college football going on. But at the time, they weren't sure there was going to be any college football. Let's put this fight on so we have a high profile program in prime time in a very important ratings month. And so that's what they did. And ESPN has, ESPN, they've lost subscribers at a huge rate. They charge a very high premium to the cable and satellite outfits for the right to put them on the air. And so that gets passed along to us as consumers. So, you pay more for ESPN than you do for CNN or anything else. Even though your bill is all one bill, you're paying more for ESPN than you're paying for any of those. And ESPN has gone from over 100 million homes. And the last time I looked, it was this year, it was like in the 80s. It was in the high 80s. They've lost, right? So that's why you see ESPN so big on streaming, and Disney Plus is such a big, point for them. They just had a reorganization yesterday that was surrounding that. But so for this fight, they have to have things that the cable operators, when they're going to come back to them and say, okay, let's renegotiate our deal. Well, remember we had that Lomachenko-Lopez fight on. It was not on pay-per-view. It was on ESPN. People got to see it. That's why they had to do that.
Yeah. Well, kind of want to also talk about some MMA. I mean, I will let you go to talk to Buckley. I promise, Kevin. But Scott and Atticus, any other kind of boxing or Lomachenko Lopez questions?
Yeah, a couple of things about 135. First of all, when you talk about footwork, I don't know if I'm only 43. I don't know if I've seen any better footwork at 35 or really anyone else better than Shane Mosley. And Loma does exactly the same things. I mean, he looks just like him to me. But, talk about 135 today. Huge fight, obviously, this weekend. But then behind it, you've got Tank and you've got Haney. And then, I know you gave me a little bit of flack for liking my boy Ryan Garcia, but he's got a chance to show what he's all about come December. So, what's your take on 135 in the next, 3 to 6 months? What do you see?
I think it's a great division. I mean, you look at it and you have somebody like Devin Haney who can be a transcendent star. I think Ryan Garcia has that ability. Teofimo Lopez has that ability. Gervonta Davis has been a good draw. Maybe not so good on TV ratings, but he sells tickets. He gets people out there. I was fighting Leo Santa Cruz at a weird thing. They're fighting for 2 weight classes. So that's an interesting thing there. But I think that, 135 is one of boxing's best weight classes. There's fighters up and down the list that are really good. And I think that is something that's good for boxing. I've written this a number of times and I've said it I've done Instagram lives and I've said it, Nancy, I'm sure you heard me say it. We're at kind of a golden age of boxing in an era, not in terms of TV ratings and not in pay-per-view sales, but there are so many talented fighters out there now, and there's a ton of them at 135. I couldn't agree with you more. I think 135 is a weight class that there's a lot of good fights that we're going to see.
I know, I can't wait. Speaking of which, and then Atticus, I don't know if did you have a question, or let's just open it up right now.
One thing, I'm not a huge boxing guy. I've tried to get into the sport a few times, but just like Professor Kidder was talking about, it is so, there's just so much going on all the time. And it's not like there's one dedicated place I've found where I can just keep track of it. But I've kept up with a few fighters, and Lomachenko is one of those. And I've watched some tape. One thing that seems to stand out to me is, the narrative of this fight seems really clear going into it. Either Lomachenko is going to manage to outbox him over 12, or he's going to get knocked out. And I don't think a lot of people see it really going differently than that. So I'm just wondering, do you think there are any what are the nuances you see in this matchup?
Well, I think Teofimo is an underrated fighter, right? He is a guy that they did a really good thing with him that they did with Floyd Mayweather, that they did with Oscar De La Hoya, that they do with a number of guys that they think are going to be really top stars. They matched him with styles that were going to challenge him on the way up, right? So he fought Nakatani, the Japanese fighter who was tall and rangy, because they knew he was going to fight some guys like that had different and difficult styles. And so he fought all these different styles. So now, there's nobody like Loma, but he has fought so many styles with so many guys that, he fought Diego Magdaleno, who's a good mover, kind of anticipation of Loma, a guy that has good feet, that is quick. And I think that they have given Teofimo the best chance that he could possibly have to win the fight. I think you laid it out. The most logical way to look at it is Loma's going to outbox him or Teofimo is going to land something. But could I see the fight going where Teofimo has that jab going in his face, and he has a stiff jab, and you think of George Foreman, and when he hits you, it didn't look like he was throwing hard, but you stopped in your tracks. And Lopez has that kind of jab. And a jab in boxing is the most important punch. And if you can get that fight where you're popping him with the jab and you're fighting in a narrow space and not letting him move around the ring, it's going to be a difference. And so I could see in that scenario Lopez winning some rounds. Now, do I ever see Lopez winning 10-2 or 9-3? No. I could see Loma doing that, but I could see Teofimo, pulling out, 6 or 7 rounds. If he gets 6 rounds with a knockdown, he wins by the point. If he gets 7 rounds, he has enough to win the fight. So I could see that happening. But on the other side of it, Loma is going to hit him with punches he doesn't see coming. And those are the punches that always hurt you the most. And so Teofimo, I'm not sure what Teofimo Sr. and Joey Gamache, the two trainers, have worked up to prepare him for that. But he has to be prepared for when he gets hit with punches he doesn't see. How does he react to it?
And that was a great question to bring up because another thing, like the comparison between boxing and MMA, is that Conor McGregor we see as one of the best MMA fighters. How many times has he lost?
Yeah.
And this whole idea that you have to have this undefeated record, and a lot of people, there was a suggestion that Lopez should wait, and he should gain more experience because you don't want to blemish that record. And look at Muhammad Ali,
right,
have this, and he's the GOAT to many people. So, yeah, what do you think about that? That people think that he should wait and get more experience?
Well, I think, if you make the argument that he should wait to get more experience because he's not ready, competitively ready now, and it could ruin him, that's one thing. Mm-hmm. And you say maybe, he's not ready and he'll get embarrassed. Like, if you look at him and you say, I think he can win the fight, but right now he doesn't have experience. We need to get him a few more fights so he gets more experience. That's one thing. But if you think he is ready as he's ever going to be, and you don't want to match because you think he's going to lose, then that's a mistake and that's wrong. And I always urge readers and my peers who are covering the fights not to care about wins and losses, care about how the fighter performs. Does he come out or does she come out and do they give you everything they have? Do they put on good shows? At the end of the day, this is nothing different than a movie or you're going to see a concert or whatever. It's entertainment. At the end of the day, for you guys, it's entertainment. And so if they deliver, and if you watch that UFC card last week, where Buckley had the great knockout and Corey Sandhagen had the knockout, and there was knockouts and submissions like crazy up and down that card. You left that card and you're going, man, I love that. That was a lot of fun, right? You sat there and you said that. You didn't care who won or lost. When Arturo Gatti was at his prime as a boxer, he lost as many as he won. But you knew every time Arturo Gatti, you were clearing the schedule and you were going to be watching TV because he was the most exciting fighter there was. That is what it's all about, going out there and, if you lose, great. If you lose by putting up a good effort, good. If you lose by running away and not fighting and not giving me your best effort, then I don't want to watch you anymore. That's how you're differentiated, or at least that's how you should be differentiated, in my opinion.
Yeah. Oh, well, taking this about losing, not that we should dwell on it, but it's part of the fight game, and it's part of also writing. You got to have that first draft that you cross out. Let's move to MMA because Brian Ortega is finally fighting. It was November 2018 that he last fought when he lost to Holloway.
December of 2018.
December. It was in Toronto, I think.
Yes.
So I don't know if there were likely injuries, all these things, but it seemed also mentally he had to kind of gain back his team. What do you think about that fight with Korean Zombie?
Well, I love the fight, and I interviewed the Korean Zombie and Brian yesterday, and I thought it was funny, when I'm calling the zombie Chan Sung, which is his name. He said zombie, he wants to be called the zombie, so that I thought was pretty funny. But I love the fight. I think it's really good. Brian Ortega, this is why I love covering fights, because there's so many layers to it. I could write just about the fight, but I could also write, like in Brian Ortega's case, you alluded to it, he was one of the great fighters, but it turns out there's so many problems. You might have seen the Modelo beer commercial with him and James Lurson, his coach. Well, now he and James Lurson are on the outs. I actually mentioned James Lurson's name to Brian during the interview. He goes, "You said his name. I did not." He was very clear. He was alluding to problems in the past, but he didn't even want to mention James's name. But you had that Modelo beer commercials talking about them being friends and they saved each other in this lifelong thing that, journey that they were on. And that wasn't true. And so there's really pointed words from Brian about what had happened in his past, and people showed themselves to be what I thought they were. And, all this. So you have a lot of layers to Brian Ortega. He also admits, And Alexander Lee on MMA Fighting, I thought did a really good job. I sent him a note last night because I read his story, and I thought he did a really good job with Ortega. He talked about, Brian's own failings, and Brian thought he was a rock star, and Halle Berry, hired him to coach her in a movie, and and he was hanging out with celebrities, and he was doing things that weren't productive for a fighter, and so he admitted that he had made some mistakes, but there's so many levels, and Ortega was so fascinating. I think it's a great fight. I think at its core, it's going to come down to Brian's jiu-jitsu versus the Zombie striking. I think, Zombie can handle himself on the ground and Brian can handle himself on the feet. But at the end of the day, those are the strengths of the respective guys. And I think what's going to decide that fight.
And we've got so much coming on. Tomorrow, Bellator, we have it's Cyborg's first featherweight title defense against Arlene Blancow, excuse me. And I looked up her record. I'm really excited about this fight because her only 2 losses are to Julia Budd, who we know is now in the UFC and just
No, Julia's in Bellator, but Cyborg just beat her for the title.
Yeah, yes, that was it. She just fought, but Julia Budd has such a career, and those were close. One was a split decision, one was a majority decision. What do you think about this matchup?
I wrote a story on Chris. I haven't seen it. I've been so busy today that I don't know if it was posted. I wrote it last night. It should be posted today. I interviewed her. She went back to Rafael Cordero, her first coach, to fight. And so it's an interesting thing. She had been training the last couple of fights in South Africa, but because of COVID, she couldn't travel. So she went to King's MMA and trained with Cordero. I wrote a little bit about her story of how she was a handball player and she was a cross-country runner when she was in Brazil as a young girl, and how she got into MMA, and Cordero was her first coach. And she didn't know how to throw a punch, she didn't know how to throw a kick, and she trained for 3 months and wanted to fight, and he said, no, you're not ready yet. And they trained another 3 months. It was 6 months. He said, okay, now you're ready. And she lost her first fight, and she talked a lot about that. I think it's an interesting fight. I don't know that Arlene has the chin to last in a shootout with Chris, and I think that's what it's going to turn into. I think Chris is going to tee off on her at some point, and so far the only women's fighter out there that really has shown that she can handle a shootout with Chris is Amanda Nunes.
Yeah, no, I mean, look at all these fights we've got coming up. Cordero, wasn't he the one, and then he trained for her for Carano?
Yeah, that was the last fight, and now he's training Mike Tyson. So I did ask her, I said, did you get a chance to see Mike? And she said, well, and it was kind of funny. I didn't use this in my story, but the way she phrased it, she says, well, Mike is kind of older, and with COVID going around, they don't want anybody around him. So I was laughing, thinking, Mike looks young to me.
I love it. He's old enough to train for a fight, but you got to be careful with COVID. That says everything about our days right now. And then I know you just talked to Dana White, and this is because he's announced Peter Yan versus Alan Sterling, which I'm very happy to see that, especially Sterling. I mean, he has won that spot. Is there anything else that came out?
There was a ton of news in that interview.
Yeah.
Islam Makhachev is not going to fight on UFC 254. That was another piece of news. They had a 6-fight main card. And Dana said, told me that they decided that, they couldn't get a fight for Makhachev. And so they decided to just pull him from the card, and they'll schedule him at some point, some other time. And then Peter Yan and Aljo are going to be the co-main event to Amanda versus Megan Anderson at UFC 256 on December 12th. But I had a fascinating conversation. I have interviewed Dana hundreds, if not thousands of times. It has to be in the thousands over the almost 30 years that I know him. He had hair when I knew him, so that's how long ago that was, and when I first met him. And I thought this was the best interview we ever did. We talked for over a half an hour. We talked a little bit at the beginning about the business. And sometimes, because we've known each other so long, Dana will give me the heat or the business, and we kind of joke with each other, and we don't a lot of times get into as much of the substance as I want. But today I thought the conversation flowed really well. We had a ton of substance. I went over all of these fights that, people are talking about. Leon Edwards. I asked him a question, for instance, I thought was fascinating. We know you don't don't like the idea of adding weight classes, having a 165-pound division. You've said that many times, but you've never said why. He explains in there why he doesn't like it, and had that out there. And I, whether you agree with him or disagree him, at least you know his position now, and it's not just I'm being stubborn, I don't want to do it. He has a rationale he thinks is good for his business why he's not doing it. And we discussed a number of other things. Of course, we talked about Habib and Justin. We talked about Israel Adesanya and sort of what his future is and what he has done. Had a long list of questions about fighters that I had asked him about. There was a tremendous amount of stuff. It was a really good interview. I was really happy with him, and I felt like the interview, people are going to really like it when it comes out.
And that's coming out Yahoo Sports maybe today?
I'm getting texts while we're talking, he said, I'm working on it, don't worry. So it should be coming out today. Yeah. I thought it would be up already. I talked to him first thing this morning first thing this morning in Las Vegas. It was evening in Abu Dhabi. But yeah, he gave me great stuff. So that should be up today. I also have Justin Gaethje tomorrow. So that's going to be out, and maybe Khamzat Chimaev on Friday. And then when I'm done with you, Nancy, I'm going to have Mike Buckley, Joaquin Buckley, and talk about his crazy knockout plus some interesting personal things about him.
That's fascinating. Well, you have to tell him that I showed that to my class, so he's now part of a college curriculum, because that's how I started my class. Saying, you think midterms are hard. Look at what this guy pulled off. Well, no, there's so much. I wanted Atticus and Scott, Poirier versus McGregor. Did Dana White tell you any more about that? That's supposedly, he said January.
Yeah, they offered that fight to Conor for January 23rd. So they're not going to move off that. They have their main event in December. So it's Conor, take it or leave it. I think right now with Conor and Dana, there's, okay, I'm going to show you who's boss. Dana was really upset that Conor released their text because it embarrassed Diego Sanchez. So, for people who don't know, Conor, had been bugging Dana behind the scenes, get me a fight. And finally, he goes to public and he puts screenshots of text messages he had back and forth. And one of the screenshots was him saying to Dana, I want to fight Diego Sanchez. Now, any rational person that knows MMA and knows the UFC, if you would propose a fight between Conor McGregor and Diego Sanchez, people would say, you know nothing about the sport, get out of here. And Dana responded that way. He basically said, dude, we should lose our promoter's license if we did that fight, which I think was an appropriate response. But what happens? Conor makes that public, and it happened to make it public at a time when Diego Sanchez had a fight in 2 days and was going to see Dana White up, and of course, that's not fair really to Diego. And so I think Dana took that and said, okay, we took the gloves off. You thought you were the boss. I'm going to show you who the boss is. So now these two are going to have a battle of wills.
No, and he's
letting those text messages go is probably not the best way to go about that. I don't think that's probably going to work out for Conor McGregor. So he says before the end of 2020, and Dana says January 23rd. And I'm probably going to go with Dana and the Bald Man crew on this one and say that it's going to be January 23rd.
Well, when you think about it, there's a lot of reasons for that. So UFC has a contract with ESPN that says, hey, we have to provide, we have minimums that we have to meet. We don't know the details of their contracts, right? But we know that they have to get, help so many subscribers to ESPN Plus and sell so many pay-per-views. So they're, Dana, and he said it in my interview today, 2020, even without Gates, is going to be their best financial year ever. So he said, barring a catastrophe in the last 3 months, 2020 is going to be their best financial year ever. That is really, think about that, is remarkable. So now if they put Conor on, they just make the year better. If they put him on in January instead of December, now they start the year with a big pay-per-view that gets them on the way toward their, toward hitting the, their contract requirement that they have to. So that's something that never will get talked about publicly, but that's really what it is. And I think under some circumstances, Dana might have said, okay, Conor, you know what? I'm a fight fan too. I want to throw you onto this card at the end of the year and make it a really sick, good card. But now that Conor put those text messages out, he said, I'm showing you that I'm the boss. I offered you a fight. It makes sense in January. take it or leave it. If you don't, we'll move on. So I think I agree with you, Scott. I think Conor, and it's really a dirty trick ethically. Like if we share text messages, they're meant for the two of us, and to share them publicly with other people. I thought that was really a bad mistake on Conor's part.
Yeah, for sure.
No.
For sure. And you know, to your point, what the UFC has been able to pull off with the number of cards they put on, given the circumstances, has been amazing.
Right.
You know, meeting their revenue goals through ESPN and ESPN Plus is fantastic. Obviously, the Middle Eastern dollar has probably pushed them over the edge a little bit, and they kind of realize that. And the Fight Island take has been brilliant.
Right.
I mean, just what an expertly well managed company. I think they're just a prime example of that. But yeah, the text message thing, you know, as soon as it came out, I'm like, that's probably not going to work out for Conor. And so now we're seeing that happen.
No, and you know, Conor just wants to have a big Christmas brunch and New Year's, right? No one wants to take the January card. But you were saying something, Kevin?
Well, yeah, I was going to say that the other thing he did that was dumb, and I don't know that he really thought about this, when he put out that he was going to fight Poirier in an exhibition. That was never going to happen because both guys are under contract with the UFC. But, you know, they could have worked together with Dana somehow. But then they put it on the date that the UFC was doing a pay-per-view. So it was like, and it was not coincidence, you know, that Conor was trying to use his leverage to say, okay, I'm bigger than whoever you can put on, and people are going to watch my show. And so UFC said, well, guess what? You have a contract with us that forbids you to fight for anywhere else without our permission. So you cannot fight anywhere else. And so that, you know, it's been a test of wills. And I think, you know, Conor has a lot of leverage and he's used it. And I applaud fighters for using their leverage, but they have to use it correctly in the right circumstances. Get the most pay that you can possibly get, you know, get other, you know, add-ons that, you know, that you want, you know, extra room for your, you know, sometimes they get 2 rooms, right? You know, get more rooms, get more perks that you might want, but you know, don't do it the wrong way. And I think Conor was trying to do it the wrong way in what he did, and you know, and he made himself look bad, and he put himself in a precarious business spot.
Got it. I have 2 questions. I know you've given us more than enough, and I know you've got an interview coming up. But first of all, can we circle back to that money thing? You said that UFC has actually had one of the most profitable years with no gate. Is that because, as Scott alluded to, they're getting money, expenses paid for by the Middle East with Fight Island? I mean, that there isn't Abu Dhabi, or I should say UAE, is paying for like the flights and the hotels and all that.
Right.
Are they also getting more ad revenue or just expenses down because they don't have to fly out to different?
So I mean, there is a word, and you'll see when you see the interview, I flat out ask him early in the thing. I say, I understand that Abu Dhabi is paying you a big fee per fight, and that's what's covering a lot of these losses, because, you know, the figure I heard was $5 million, so that they were getting $5 million per show that they put on over in Abu Dhabi. He said, I don't want to talk about the business stuff like that. So he deflected that, but he did talk a little bit about why they've been successful. But I think, you know, that they are getting, whether it's 5 million or whether it's less, you know, if you look, most of their cards are under 5 million gate. So right off the bat, if you're getting a $5 million payout, you know, you're ahead of the game. Then their pay-per-views are up, because I think what happened is, you know, in May, when they came back, there was no other sports out there. So the hardcore fans came back. Then they attracted new fans that said, you know, hey, I want to see there's nothing else on TV. They created a generation of fans. And so that's been a really smart move on their part. So I think the money's coming from different tills, you know, but certainly, you know, he knows his business, and he knows, so they're on track. Last year was the biggest year they've ever had, and he feels like they're going to surpass it this year.
Wow. Well, that says so much. And that kind of brings me into my question about predictions for the future. You know, discussing, you know, the live gate. I do believe also that a lot of people watching baseball, watching NBA, maybe a little bit more successful, they miss going to the stadiums. They don't even like to watch it without the people in it. I think also with all these kind of team sports, it's so much more location. And I really think that they figured out that fighting, you can make it universal, and that, you know, you forgot about the fans. It's going to be weird when the fans come back.
Yeah.
My question, when do you think, or will they? I don't think they're in a hurry. What do you think?
Well, I asked Dana this on my interview, so you'll see it. There's a rumor out there that there are going to be some limited fans at Abu Dhabi. That they're working on protocols now to bring fans in. So he basically said, we're looking at it. We're not sure when it's going to happen. It might happen now. It might be the next time we come back. Nevada is nowhere near ready to have fans. The governor did allow in big stadiums, 10% capacity, but UFC is not going to do that because it wouldn't make sense for them. They're going to create more issues. If they could get, 20,000 people in, then they would jump through hoops to, figure out how to keep the people safe. But given that they can't do that, the amount of money they would get by letting the small amount of fans in that the governor's allowing. So they're gonna leave Abu Dhabi after the Habib fight on the 24th, and then the rest of the year is going to be in Las Vegas. So I don't think you'll see any more fans this year unless they get them into UFC 254. Judge what you think of how Dana responded to my direct question. I said I've heard a rumor, and I'm pretty sure this is accurate, and then you'll see how he responds.
And so the 54, that's the Khabib.
Yes.
Oh yeah. Can you imagine what that ticket is to get? And you get to go to Fight Island, which is like Disneyland isn't really even Disneyland right now.
Well, my guess would be it's not going to be people buying tickets at a box office or a Ticketmaster. It's going to be people who are friends of the royal family who are going to be going into that thing. That would be my guess.
No, that is what a place. I know that my husband has told me that would be his ultimate big, like, to go there now.
I've been there and it's awesome, and when I was there for the fights, it was still being developed. I mean, a lot of it, what you see now was done, but it was still being developed. It's a phenomenal place, but be ready for the heat.
There you go. Well, thank you, Kevin. Does anyone have any last minute things? Because I could go on, but I know we're so thrilled for the time. Thank you for all your support with my students in terms of, allowing them to contact you with questions about writing and how you get into it.
Yeah, and if I always say this, you hear me I'm on IG live a lot, and I had it happen yesterday. Anybody wants to write me and they want to ask me for tips, or they want me to critique something they've written, or anything that they want to know about journalism, I feel so strongly about journalism, and I want to see the next generation of journalists be better than we are and get off to a good start. And it's a difficult field, but it's still rewarding, and there's still a lot that can be done. So they can just hit me on Twitter or Instagram, and I'll definitely hook up with them and help out in any way that I can.
You guys heard that, and obviously Yahoo Sports, go there everyone needs to tune into this Dana White, because I'm curious what his answer about the 165 belt is. But thank you. What a year to be a combat sports journalist. Amazing.
It's been crazy.
Yes, actually, Kevin, I think that you should write about this like later when we have time to reflect and think about it, because what a wild ride.
This might be the first chapter of my book, Nancy.
I know, it's crazy. Well, thank you. We'll be tuning in, and please come and say hi to Writing and Fighting whenever you'd like.
Whenever you need me, I'm always here for you. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Kevin.
Scott. Thank you, Atticus, for coming. Hey.
Bye.
Atticus, do you know Scott?
I do.
You do?
Yeah, we've been on a call before. How are you, buddy?
Yeah. So that was cool to hear all of that. There's so much going on right now. I was like talking to my husband. He's like, "Do you know Bellator's tomorrow?" And I'm like, "What?"
Yeah, they've been showing up on crazy days.
Is it on?
I mean, just ridiculous stuff. So
yeah, is it on CBS now? Because it's not. Remember they changed.
I'd like CBS Sports Network or something. Is that what it's on?
I don't even know. But fascinating to see what's going on. I'm so excited for Lopez Lomachenko.
I mean, it's like there hasn't been a big fight like this in a really long time, and it's two real high level guys. I mean, I kind of brought it up. I don't see how Lopez kind of stays close in this fight. I mean, I think Loma blows his doors off. I really do. It's just the style. Like Kevin touched on it. His footwork is impeccable. His speed, his reflexes. He notices his feet. The one thing that I see with Loma is his laser vision, his focus, his eyes. They're always looking through. The guy is incredible. He's a specimen. He touched on the jab a little bit, and Lopez's father is like, hey, we throw our jabs with bad intentions. And to me, that's like the most not smart thing to do. If you throw an over aggressive jab, I'm going to sidestep. I'm going to hit you in the liver. I'm going to come over the top. That's a very easy thing to combat, especially at that level with somebody who's as technically gifted as Loma. I'm thinking maybe that's where we might see a little deficiency and he might get caught. I box 4 to 6 rounds a day outside. It's one of my favorite things to do. And I start my workout with 4 825s, and all I do is jab both hands 100 times before I even start my workout. I don't before I get into my rounds. It's been one of my favorite things to do since I've had a little wake up call. But none of those are thrown with any type of vigor or aggression. They're meant to be fast. They're meant to be sharp. They're meant to be in a certain place and to create control. So when I heard that, I'm like, okay. I mean, Larry Holmes was physically gifted. He has the best jab in the history of boxing. And it was heavy-handed, but maybe not the best idea for a 135-pounder to throw in his first title attempt against a guy who's maybe one of the most gifted 135-pounders we've ever seen. So just my take. I mean, I'm probably going to be wrong. He's probably going to knock him out the jab. And
we'll see. I know you've been looking at the betting lines.
It's wide.
It's pretty wide. I feel like, this is what I love about sports writing. I feel like they want to make this an exciting event, and I love that. But I'm like, because when you look at, you look at Lomachenko, you look at what he's done, and Lopez, I think it's like negative 300.
It's 320 or something. Something like crazy.
Like tight of it could be anyone kind of thing.
Yeah. And typically, when it's that far off, someone knows something. These lines are, those are kind of silly close.
They don't mess around. But I do appreciate that we want this to be a big fight. And hey, it's on ESPN. You don't have to pay, because I think boxing pay-per-views are more expensive than a UFC pay-per-view. They're like, sometimes
they have been lately. It's crazy. It's pretty wild. What am I saying? I'm saying negative 400.
Huh.
Jesus.
Yeah. So
come on. That's wide. That's a lot.
I've heard, this is just from my students, I haven't checked it myself, that Lopez got puffed up a lot. So I know that boxing don't think about that as much for some reason. That I don't know that they can the stamina, it is a big deal, stamina. So I don't know. I'm a little worried about that.
I feel like guys usually just cut less in boxing too.
Yeah, they do. So,
Loma, like you said, Loma isn't a natural 135er. He walks around in the 140, so getting 35 is no problem.
Yeah.
But this kid, first of all, this kid is 23 years old. He's going to end up at 54 or 60. Oh, yeah. He's going to get there. He's a bigger kid. He's got a Hispanic background, so it's not going to lend him to staying small as well. He's from Brooklyn. That's certainly not going to help. He's got all the indicators that's going to say he's going to get up into a higher weight class. But the one thing you fear in a fight like this, not just the Kostya Tszyu example was Zab Judah, but also I remember Jeff Lacey getting with Joe Calzaghe, and Lacey was the big thrower, the big puncher, knocked everybody out. And Calzaghe ruined him. Literally ruined his entire career. And he was very young at that point. And Lacey still fought a bunch of fights after that and won some things here and there, but was completely ruined. And, great. These guys are taking the challenges, and I'm all for it. As a fan, I think it's great. This is the fight that needed to happen, but that's an inherent risk you're going to run into here is this guy going to get ruined? Because Loma is not going to play with this guy. He is a very, very serious individual when he steps in there. So,
you guys have seen some of the training, like he does, like those precision hand-eye coordination, all those kinds of things.
Did you see it on ESPN today? There's like a 3-minute video of it.
No, I haven't seen that. Oh,
he does push-ups with rings, where he puts the rings on the ground and pushes up, and then he's he's doing a Superman pushing off, getting air, and then coming back down on the rings. It's bananas. It's crazy. I mean, it's unbelievable what this
takes so much stability that, oh my God, that's crazy.
I was watching, I'm like, come on. I mean, he's doing the, the light board with reactions and things like, I mean, some of those things you see, but this is
we'll see.
Actually,
I mean, that would be nuts, but I kind of like, I hate to compare to this, but the knockout was what Conor was going to bring to like Mayweather, right? Like that. And I see this kind of like, sometimes that's not a great way to build your fight plan around.
You never want to rely on like a puncher's chance, especially at lower weight classes, especially when you're fighting a guy who's way faster than you are and has better cardio and has like every physical advantage except for like size and power.
Yeah. No, I know.
The thing about Conor we saw is, he gasses. I mean, he's always gassed. He gasses in 25-minute fights. So I'm thinking, okay, how far does 15 minutes get him? Because that's when he's going to lose. So I'm thinking 8th, 9th, 10th round, and I was right. I mean, and it's plus. I mean, let's be honest. Floyd Mayweather carried that fight. I mean,
he played with
that.
Come on.
It was fun, but he played with them.
Undefeated. What is fun is how he allowed people to buy into that fight.
Yeah.
He got
for
sure.
sure.
He got all the public. I mean, that is the brilliance of Mayweather.
Here you go. I pulled up the video. Let's see if we can.
Can you share? Wait, can I share?
Here you go.
Oh my God.
So it's in slow motion.
Because those rings should fall over with a normal person.
Oh my God.
Come on.
What? Okay, I don't understand the physics of that. All right. I don't know.
The guy's incredible.
Vegas
He's an incredible athlete.
Has 400 because that's insane.
I'll be curious to see, on the fight night weigh-in with Lopez if they let him do it. I mean, what's he going to come in at 60?
Oh, I know.
He's going to be big. He's going to be big.
So, I mean, that is something, but could he just be picked? Is it going to be harder for Lomachenko to pick him off?
No, not if he's not. If he had to go from 60 to 35 and now he's back at 60 the next night, he's not going to be right. He's going to be sluggish. He's not. I mean, he's still going to have his power, but I mean honestly, that's an easy fight for Loma. I've seen this 100 times. I don't see how Lopez pulls this. I really don't. I mean, it's in that negative 400 you see, and it's like it's a big fight and it's negative 400, but it makes all the sense in the world.
Yeah, I know. What do you think about Korean Zombie and Ortega? Because I really haven't studied that matchup as much as I should, because I've been on the Loma.
They're gonna fight. It's gonna be fun for us to watch. They're gonna fight.
Yeah,
and they're gonna bring it. It's gonna be great. I mean,
we haven't seen a ton from either of them, honestly.
There what? There hasn't. No, because remember, Korean Zombie had to take off time for the army.
Well, and he fought Yair in a 5-rounder.
Yeah.
And
that fight was great. That was awesome. I mean, the walk-off knockout was awesome. That was great.
That was
But then he had like 2 first-round KOs in a row. And like Brian hasn't fought in like 2 years at this point.
Yeah. Apart by Holloway.
And he got picked apart by Holloway, but also like that fight early was, I think, that fight early was not competitive necessarily, but it's a lot more competitive than people remember just because Holloway landed like 100 more strikes. And Zombie's not a super technical striker. He hits hard, he has great counters, but like Ortega's never actually been finished. His head is just like a block of concrete. And I'm not sure Zombie, who's a pretty fragile guy, can like actually go the distance with him. And he can't use his like great submission game on Ortega. Ortega is going to be better on the ground.
Great. I remember
what condition the guys come in.
Yeah.
I think Zombie is actually like he has I don't think he can actually have a decision. Like it's got to be a finish of some sort. Like he's either getting finished or he's finished some. I mean, he's exciting to watch. you
Yeah.
know, and he's going to kind of be who he is. I mean, he's not going to be in a title fight. You know, he's going to be the first fight of the night, or he's going to be the last fight of the prelims. Get you excited to buy. You get all juiced up. You have a couple of, like you said, beers, or in my case, orange LaCroix.
Oh my.
And it's what it's come to, Nancy. It's where we're at. It's a stark reality, unfortunately. But you get all juiced up and you see this guy fight, and you're like, okay, got to buy the pay-per-view because they're all going to be like that. And so
got it. So you were just in Vegas, like
yeah, we started in Vegas, did some hiking.
What was
went through the Grand Canyon.
Oh, nice.
How
was the
Sedona? Yeah.
In COVID, are people social distancing and?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. There was, it was light numbers, but I mean, it was great. I mean, we were in Zion, we were in Sedona. We were kind of all over, kind of did a whole little loop, and then back to Vegas for a couple of days. And hung out by the pool at Caesars, which was nice.
Is it a lot less crowded, or is it still a lot of people?
Here's what we noticed, okay. and we both said this. Yeah, it was less crowded. The people who were there, it wasn't a typical Las Vegas crowd.
Okay, typical. By the way, I still have this live. Okay, so
I'm just gonna leave it there. Not the typical Las Vegas crowd.
Okay, no, I need to know this because when you watch Ocean's 11 or you watch some of these movies, that's not typical Vegas, like where people are wearing the glam thing. So I think that typical Vegas is more rough around the edges. Is it that?
You know, when I go to Las Vegas, I try to get myself even out of I try to bring my nicest clothes, and I try to, you know, live a little bit larger than I normally would, you know, in my hoodie and my fancy water and whatever else. And you know, I try to, you know, play a little, you know, poker in a nice room, and it just wasn't a lot of that going on. It was a very common crowd. It was, you know, it was kind of like, okay, why isn't the buffet open, or why isn't Applebee's open later? And no one cared that the fancy restaurants weren't open on certain days. It was a really, really different aura in Las Vegas. Last time I was there, it was weird.
People go there for the flash. You want to go there with your guys' night and you know, or girls, and start it up like you would go and you go see Calvin Harris, right? And you want to take Instagram pictures. When you can't do that, you know, and you can't do that anywhere anymore.
No.
Those Instagram moments are not happening. So it's an interesting place. And I wondered how Vegas was going through that. I've heard that
it was weird. I mean, like the fancy restaurants were closed Monday and Tuesday night. Like all the places you and I talked about, you're like, go to Mesa. Well, you don't have to tell me to go to Mesa. I built Mesa. I'm the reason why they're probably still open. It's my favorite restaurant. And when they closed in New York, I legitimately cried. I was super sad. It closed on Monday and Tuesday. It's like, are you kidding me? Like the Italian restaurant you told me about in Aria, Carbone, closed on Monday and Tuesday. Everything was closed. So I'm like, okay, I'm not kind of, you know, I don't have a ton of options here.
But you're in Florida, which are they fully open? No restrictions?
Well, you saw what the governor did now. He's like, open up the stadiums, go do whatever you want. Right?
I guess it was Texas. I was like, is that a replay from last year? I saw a baseball game with fans in it. And I'm like,
yeah, the NLCS has fans in Texas.
I'm just like, this, for my brain, like where I look outside and everyone's wearing a mask, and you know, we're still in restrictions.
My favorite is, you know, the Florida football coach last week. He goes, the crowd made all the difference. He goes, next week against LSU, we need to fill up the swamp. Full crowd, 80,000 people. They just canceled the Florida football game due to 20 positive COVID tests on the football team. So, I mean, it's like they don't learn here. Maybe, you know, because we're at the bottom of the country, information filters down slower. I don't know what it is, man. I mean, but he got what he asked for. Fill it up.
I feel like no offense to Florida, you are an Ohio Buckeye native, so you know, I don't mean to say that you're biased, but Florida's definitely has some interesting parts, you know, and it's going to be Ohio and Florida are deciding our president, though, so that'll be.
Yeah, you know, I mean, there's some talk about him losing Florida. I mean, the numbers are starting to slide here a little bit. If he loses Florida, I mean, he goes to bed early,
They're dead
8:30.
even in Ohio right now. Biden's up by 1 in Ohio.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Wow.
if he loses Florida, I mean, that's crazy. Biden's gonna win New York, and
He's up 6 in Georgia, which like,
Oh my God, this is
Yeah.
great. I'm afraid
yeah,
to,
that
I have still 2016 kind of like where we thought it was going to go one way. So I'm afraid to even look. But what were you saying, Scott?
it's just crazy to me, the whole election thing. I mean, he was here, I think yesterday. I think he rolled through. I think he did like a train tour or something.
He's bringing it to
COVID for you. Just everybody get it.
yeah, I know.
It's just wild. I mean, but you watch the debate and you're like, okay, all Biden really has to do is not look awful, and he looked about as awful as you could possibly imagine, and that is going to sway some people back the other way. Because Trump does Trump things and whatever else.
My only sad thing is that I don't think Colby Covington. I didn't hear he got COVID, and that was kind of my hope for that whole thing. But who knows? Who knows?
Oh well, yeah. So what's going on up there? I mean, are you still kind of closed down, or I mean, how's it?
Down. I mean, Atticus is here. Our campus is virtual, and I don't know. Have you heard about spring, Atticus?
GW went online. I feel like we're going to go online.
I've heard the same thing. It's just hard because everyone comes from a different place in DC. Especially students, and so that was the hardest thing. Is like how everyone's coming from. You're coming from Oregon, and so that's one of the issues with kind of these super spreaders or those problems. But I think there's indoor dining, but very restricted. I haven't done it. I really haven't done much outdoor dining.
No.
I'm trying to think. I think
had like park benches, but that's it.
What was that?
I had like park benches,
like
picnic benches, but that's about it.
I mean, because I heard that bars are open in Florida, and that
it's full go, baby. I mean, it's wide open, man. Whatever you want.
The president got COVID. Like that didn't do, and then but it's
and the whole Joint Chiefs of Staff got it, and the First Lady.
Oh my God,
it's crazy, right? But yeah, open them up. Let's go.
So when did this happen with Florida? That they had to postpone their game
today. Yeah, happened today, maybe 2 hours ago.
Who were they fighting against? Who were they fighting?
Playing LSU.
Oh God, and that's a major game. Wow, because I was wondering, they had, the Big Ten came back, and they're back, but I'm like, I was gonna say that there's gonna be a point where too many games have to be postponed. Because I just know young people. I was young, and I know because it's very hard to not even eat with friends, right?
I'm basically quarantining with my girlfriend, but I see her and her roommate, so
have a pod. And
yeah, that's about it.
But that's not happening because it was ridiculous to ask that for that, and that's why I'm glad Americans we're not gonna make it happen. Because what I've heard, Scott, is that I have some friends at Case Western in Cleveland.
Okay. Yeah.
They did go hybrid, a lot of first year classes. So the professors got the mask, they've got the mask. They're in lecture halls of 20 people in a whole lecture hall. There's plexiglass for the professor. Guess what, you guys? Students are not always coming to class.
No.
Right?
No.
I thought.
Well, I mean, I don't care if you got an 8 a.m. class, COVID, no COVID. It's a crapshoot.
No,
so.
I think that what we always knew is that on-campus experience is really, as much as I think Professor Kidder being in my presence adds so much. I think it's really also they really wanted to be with each other, and that going the classroom experience is not the defining part of it. So but yeah, I thought that was funny. The teacher's and I'm having half the people there.
It's crazy. It's crazy. So
God.
yeah, Elizabeth's been back in school. She started back and is doing the whole thing.
Got it. So is she wearing? She's in middle school or high school?
Eighth grade. Yeah.
Grade. Well, my
Mhm.
daughter's home. I mean, she started 10th grade at home. I mean, some days it's kind of like, God, that must suck. But then I'm kind of like, well, there were days I wish I could stay home.
Sure.
So,
But it doesn't matter the dynamic, whether you're a kid, whether you're my age. If you're doing something, you want to do the other thing, and
yeah. No.
so it's going okay so far. And they've had, I think, one case in the district. I mean, it's been very, very low. But obviously it's not full capacity, so you have to deal with that. Just kind of take it as it goes. Hopefully, I mean, the statistics stay true, and I mean, if healthy people kind of push this thing out.
Yeah. No, and
So
when we get back together, oh my gosh, I am going to go to Vegas every weekend, maybe. I don't know. I am going to be it's not that I've lost the urge or the desire to go. I'm just kind of simmering right now.
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, I think you probably seen. I've traveled a ton.
Yeah, well,
Like personal travel. Like I mean, but you get on a plane, it's half full. You don't worry about it. It's just I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of caught in the middle on it. I certainly haven't erred 100% to the side of safety, but when I am out, I err to the side of safety. Keep your social distance. Don't breathe on anybody. Don't shake anybody's hands. Don't kiss and hug anybody. That kind of thing, right? Food's going to come from where food's going to come from. There's no documented cases of it going through food transmission, so you feel pretty safe there. Just risks, right? But calculated risks. So, but traveling, there's no one out. There's no one out. It's like the best travel I've ever had. There's no one out. It's great.
I love it. And mitigating your risk, basically do everything opposite the rose garden. That's what I put with that, Don't sit right next to people. Don't take your mask off. Don't be inside. And you're fine.
Yeah. I got my mask right here, and then 3 days later, he's got COVID. So maybe wear it. I don't know. You're the president. You probably have access to some pretty good masks.
Yeah, I don't know.
So
it'll be nice to also have a culture war. It's a lot, not so much probably in boxing, but in MMA. We've been talking about this, Atticus, right? And you really did a great job of talking why we kind of need to know this. But it was just, kind of having politics involved and having it play out a lot on social media. And I just kind of want a president so that we respect and we can go back to treating each other with more decorum, because I feel that that's something.
Isn't it important for the president to be presidential?
I'd say so.
I mean, look, I mean, I there are things that I like that I don't know a lot about. Horse racing, American history, and the presidency has always infatuated me, and I've always had the impression that the president should be presidential, should be a leader.
Yeah.
I probably shouldn't have every answer, even though he has access to all the answers and can get them. But I think there's a way of going about it, right? And
this will be the playbook for what not to do. Or maybe the fact that we had these kind of implicit expected protocols, but they were like that you turn over your tax return. That wasn't a law, or wasn't, but, or just kind of being civil, not lying, stuff like that, trying to have respect for people. It'll be interesting. I know I'm craving it. What about you, Atticus?
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, I don't even know at this point. I'm just ready for things to calm down everywhere.
Yeah, I know.
And he should lose. He definitely should lose. He's probably going to lose. I want him to lose so much. But also, I'm not sure. And until it happens, I'm just going to be
I think we're all
just crossing my fingers before I go to sleep every night.
Yeah.
Well, but if it's Joe Biden and something happens to Joe Biden, I mean, we're one step closer to President Kamala Harris. I mean, what does that represent for us? I mean, she's opinionated, right? She has stances that could or could not benefit us. I don't know. I remember, remember when we had George Bush as our vice president, and I mean, if something happened, you would be like, okay, this is the guy, and it's no problem. And you wonder now with Mike Pence and Kamala Harris, are they capable as a president? So it's things you worry about.
Well, I just want the main president should be presidential, as you say.
I think we'll get that with Biden. You think about it, if he runs 4 years ago, he walks into the White House, walks. They open the front door for him. It's over. I don't know. I really would. My dream scenario was for John Kasich to have been president. He's the last guy to balance the budget.
Did you know him back in Ohio?
Good friends with my grandfather. Yeah, they've worked together for about 40 years.
He seems like a really good guy.
So I don't know if you knew this, but when I was going through college decisions, he was going to write my recommendation to the Air Force Academy.
Oh my gosh. Scott, I did not know this.
Yeah.
But you
I'm
just
not, wasn't really cut out for that life. That wasn't me, but it was an option. It was on the table, especially after I tested through the roof on the ACT.
Wow.
I had all the doors open, everything open to me. So, those things were there, and it was on the table, and it was discussed, and we had it secured. So, but yeah, they've worked together for about 40 years. My grandfather was director of operations for Blue Cross and Blue Shield, and sat on some of the health advisory boards in the state of Ohio, and worked closely with him.
Small world.
Yeah. So we've known Mr. Kasich for a long time, and it's if you look at that Republican panel from 4 years ago, it's a dream team, right? With Ben Carson and even Donald Trump on the business side, successfully or not. And Kasich is a leader in budgetarily wise and foreign relations, the things that he's done, dream team, right? And now we've got Ben Carson running HUD. Tell me what Ben Carson knows about running housing and urban development. I don't think he's figured it out yet.
Yeah.
But he cut the deal and he got the job for 4 years. So, to get, Trump his votes to get over the top, which is what I think kind of put him over Kasich on the Republican side anyway, was carrying that contingency with him. So I could go on about it forever. It was just an odd thing. And all I think about is Doc Emmett Brown saying, who's the president in 1985? Ronald Reagan, the actor. Still think about it.
I know. And, if you had gone to the Air Force, you might have been doing push-ups like Lomachenko.
Probably not. Not a chance. Incredible video, right?
Oh, it is. It is. Well, I'll be thinking about you guys. I always, I don't know what we're going to make. To think about it. Maybe some Ukrainian, Honduran special. I don't know. But I hope you guys have a good weekend. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's awesome, man. I can't wait to, see the backside of this and see how this fight turns out. If you open up a chat or something on Saturday night during the fight, I'll probably jump in.
Yeah, totally. Let's do it because
all right.
I'm going to be just, on pins and needles and loving it.
For sure.
Thank you. And is he gone? Oh,
nope. I just got a call. I had to kill it.
So I dropped off your t-shirts and she's like, "Are you a courier?" And I said, "No." And she's like, "Well, I can't accept it." And so you know what I said? Because Atticus lives in a apartment building here near campus that has very strange rules because you have your desk. You have the desk?
Yet.
Oh my Lord.
My roommate, it turns out, lives in an apartment, not a house. So that's definitely not ideal.
He tried to get a desk back in September and they turned it away because it was too big. And so Atticus, I said,
no way.
I said something. I said, I've heard that people aren't able to get their packages here. That's why I wanted to make, and she said, no, it's usually them that they just don't want to drop it off and then they go sell it or something. And I don't know. And then I started sweet talking to her and she's like, who is it? And I was like, my Atticus. And she's like, oh, I'll get it to him. So
wow. Amazing.
I know, just to get you a package, but I hope you get your desk.
Oh, I am waiting.
You send it to me.
I may have to do that. Thank you for offering.
You've got
I actually may have to do that.
Oh, it's fine. And I have a garage. You can it can be put in.
Yeah.
So I don't have I have an SUV. That'll probably be big enough for a desk.
That could work. And I can get like an Uber X too.
I don't know. Let me take care of it. All right,
Thanks.
sorry, Scott. We have some business.
No,
get
that's
my-
awesome. Yeah, set up if you open like a chat room or something, or like a Facebook room or something on Saturday, I'll jump in because I'm super pumped for that. I'm sure I'll be glued at 10 o'clock.
You know, I know that we have some high school friends, Nate and Shane. They're more MMA, but this boxing mat's huge. So
Yeah, for sure.
All
For
right.
sure. All right, I'll talk to you Saturday. Thanks, guys. Bye, Atticus. See you, buddy.
Bye.
Bye. Good to see you again.
Take care.
Take care. Atticus, do you want my address?
How about you email it to me? Just since we
Okay.
are still live on YouTube.
Oh, yeah, we are. I totally forgot. All right. Well, I will do that. And please.
Thank you so much.
Oh my God. My pleasure. Thank you for joining us.
Yes.
All right. Take care.
See you soon.
Bye.